Welcome to the Voodoo Power Podcast.
Welcome to Plates and Pancakes. We're sitting down today with Ryan Napoli. Coach Napoli is the Director of Athletic Performance for football at North Dakota State. Napoli began his career at NDSU in 2011 after 1 year as an intern at the Air Force Academy. He spent 6 seasons at NDSU, working with the Bison's football, wrestling, and track and field teams. He was on staff for NDSU's first 5 FCS national championships. Napoli went on to become the football strength conditioning coach at Southeast Missouri State and the director of sports performance for Northern Illinois football. He then returned to SEMO to spend 4 seasons as the director of sports performance before returning to Fargo. Napoli graduated from Simpson College with a bachelor's degree in exercise science and served as an undergraduate strength conditioning assistant. Napoli earned a master's degree in health and nutrition and exercise science from NDSU and is a certified strength conditioning specialist through the NSCA. So welcome to the show, Coach.
Appreciate you. Thanks for having me on. Fired up to be here.
Yeah, I kind of reached out and a lot of college coaches don't get back with me. So man, to have you get back with me, I was pretty excited.
I'm excited. I'm glad that you text me or hit me up on Instagram. I was like, immediately, yes, because I love talking about this stuff. And then the fact that you're close to Kansas City and a Missouri boy like myself, that's makes it a little sweeter too, you know.
So where'd you grow up?
Kansas City, Missouri proper. I'm from the north side of Kansas City. I went to St. Pius High School, lived up there by the airport. But then I also have family up in Platte City, so kind of bounce back and forth between the farm up in Platte City and Kansas City, and best friends in Liberty. So my dad lives in Independence now, so pretty much all of Kansas City I've been around everywhere and nearby. So
I live south of Kansas City about an hour, and when they were building I-10-2 up there at Weston, I took a call working up there. Man, that's nice country up there around the Platte City area.
Oh yeah, we had 88 acres to hunt on, and shot my first buck on that farm, and shot my first buck with a bow on that farm, and so it's got great land up there and a good deer hunting up there too.
Yeah, those hills up there, they bring out some pretty big deer.
Yep. Unfortunately, I haven't shot a big one yet, but my uncle has and my family has, so I'm sure there's a big one out there waiting for me. But until then, we'll keep on hunting.
Now, as I was researching all this and getting ready and looking at different things, the one thing that popped up was a tweet from some years back and that called you the bearded bear.
Yeah. Oh man. So I didn't even really understand how Twitter worked when all that happened. My buddy from college had sent me a screenshot of it and was like, "Hey, this is you." And I was like, "All right, what the heck's going on?" So obviously I pull up Twitter and pull it up, and it was like, "All right, this is kind of cool." And it was North Dakota State strength coach, looks like a bear raiding a trash can or something funny like that. And so I just tweeted back at the guy, the double eye emoji. I didn't know who this guy was. I didn't realize he was like a big time blogger of SEC football and that people knew who he was every day. Should be Saturday, EDSBS on Twitter. Can't remember his name, but we actually ended up having a relationship, and I helped him out with a couple articles and some workouts and stuff for him. But yeah, so that kind of hit, and I got Twitter famous for a day and had a bunch of new followers and tweets and stuff. And so he ended up giving me the nickname the Bearded Bear, and it kind of stuck. Last time I seen my clean shaven face was 2011 before the first national championship game. Coach Bull wanted to make sure we didn't look like the wild men from the north. So I shaved, and that's the last time I've seen my clean shaven face. So I've always had the beard. I've always kind of called it, my strength. And so this guy, Spencer Hall was his name, and he gave me the moniker the Bearded Bear, and he did a couple articles on his website and on his blog about me and worked with him. And so Bearded Bear just kind of stuck, and I still use it to this day. I mean, and I thought it was cool because I had never really popped off on social media like that. And so it was kind of cool to be up there with a bunch of other, strength coaches in the profession from Nebraska and all these, big time places. And here I am, just some random dude from North Dakota State, and I'm getting blown up on Twitter. But it was awesome.
Now, the one thing about it, from coming from Kansas City, so when we were younger, we went out west and we cowboyed up in northern Montana, Great Falls area, not too far from Glacier. It took a little while to get used to that weather. So coming from Kansas City, how long did it take you to kind of acclimate to Fargo?
Man, when I tell you, I didn't know what cold was until I got to Fargo. It took a while. Now, the problem was that no matter how cold it got, the wind kept making it colder. And so, you're layered up. I lived in an apartment when I first got there, and we had the garage because, you pretty much need a garage up here. And it was probably, I don't know, good maybe 10, 15 yards to the garage. And I remember showering before work one morning. And from the time I left the apartment and got to the garage, my beard was completely frozen, nostrils frozen, eyes hurt because it was super cold and windy. And I was just like, oof, this is brutal. But after a while, you get used to it. It's just cold. When we got back from the national championship game in 2013, we had just been Towson that year. We get back, and it is cold as all get out. Wind chill was minus 60. It took like probably an hour for my car to warm up before I could defrost. I think it had been sitting there for 3 days and we had snow and ice, but it took an hour for that thing to get warm to drive home. And yeah, it's cold and it takes a little bit to get used to it. But then when I left here and went to SEMO, my blood was pretty thick, and so I was giving them a hard time for what they thought was cold. I was like, man, this is nothing. But then I get back to Fargo a second time, and boy, cold is still cold. And I'm still working on getting that blood back. It's probably going to take me a year, another winter to get fully acclimated to this cold. But it's cold, but it's when you're winning and doing what you love and enjoying life, it ain't that bad. You get over it pretty quick.
That's the one thing I remember is you can't explain to somebody what negative 65 feels like. You can't breathe. I mean, if you do anything that involves activity, you think you're going to suffocate because your lungs are froze. You can't breathe. You can't do anything. It's different for sure.
It's brutal, absolutely brutal. But it's what you get living up this far north.
So you've had the good fortune of working with Jim Kramer. What kind of influence has that had on you? I mean, that's an advantage that a lot of guys don't get. So you got to see what he was doing day in, day out and build on that. How'd that help you out?
Tremendously, man. Jim Kramer, who's I'm co-director with now, but he's been the only strength coach at North Dakota State football since they went D1. And he's not very well, I would say very well known, but he not a social media guy, and he's not a him guy. And so his whole career has been about football team. And, I think it's so cool because he's got 9 national championships. I mean, this guy was with Doc Stone out at App State. That's where he got to start with Mike Kent and Jim Lathrop, who was at Illinois State for a long time. And they were all GA-ing out at App State for Doc Stone and Meg Stone. And, just being able to talk to him about that experience. He was at Georgia Tech, Northern Iowa. He actually did a year out at the United States Olympic Training Center out in Colorado Springs as the Greco wrestling strength coach. And so, he's so much experience and honestly the best at what we do. I mean, he's the GOAT. I mean, how many strength coaches have 9 national championships? He's coached, Carson Wentz and Trey Lance and a bunch of NFL guys and helped make North Dakota State a powerhouse. And I would probably need a whole hour to tell you everything about that man. But being able to be a part of his program and see how he operates, he taught me so much about what it truly meant to be a strength coach. Like I kind of knew I got into strength and conditioning because of my collegiate strength coach, Justin Snyder, back at Simpson College. He kind of took me under his wing and really helped guide me. Especially, coming from my past, I was kind of running from stuff when I got to college. And so he, you know, helped me out. And that's where I got my love of strength and conditioning. And then when I got out with Kramer at North Dakota State, man, it just blossomed. It's so much more than sets and reps. Why do we do an exercise? One of the first things he cussed me out pretty good now. And we were doing the exercise, tricep extension to press. So you do 10 tricep extensions, and then you keep that same grip, and then you do 10 presses. We're in a hypertrophy phase, and I, young and dumb and hadn't been there real long. And he comes up to me and goes, Nap, do you know why we're doing this exercise? I'm like, upper body day, coach. It's, 20 reps a set, 60 reps in total. Like we're just getting some volume in on triceps because we're trying to, grow our muscles. And he looked at me and he goes, and he said some choice words, but he goes, you're effing wrong. And I was just like, okay. He's like, see, that's a freaking problem. You gotta understand it's more than just physiology. There's so much more to it. And he proceeded to tell me we do tricep extend and press because by the third set, you're supposed to hit failure. And then your teammates are supposed to be there to spot you. And so it's about getting you to push yourself to further than you think you can go, like actually taking yourself to failure so you know where you're at, but then also having your teammates, your brothers there to spot you, to take care of you, and to get you through it so that you learn where your new edge is and your brothers learn where your edge is so they can help you be a better player and you be a better player for them. And it was profound. It was like, okay, this is bigger than sets and reps. It's bigger than weights. It's how do you build a freaking team and a culture and something that lasts? This isn't a 1-year thing. He's been doing this 20 years there, and 10 of the years, nine out of the last 11, like one of the most dominant programs in all of FCS football history. And there'll be a lot of people in the comment section probably talking a bunch of trash and telling me about the guys down south who, have won the last two. But, when you look at a dynasty and what that means, and every year, I remember this too, every January. So we win the national championship. We're back 10 days later. And he does not allow any national championship gear to be worn in the weight room because it's like, no, we're new mission. That stuff, wear it outside, give it to your girlfriends, wear it when you go out. But when we're working and preparing for next year, we don't need last year, and so just being able to learn, the finer points of how to build something, man, it was invaluable. And like I said, I mean, I love that. I came back to work, alongside him again because I remember just how much I learned. And I called him so many times, when I got my first opportunity to be the director at SEMO. I remember calling him and being like, man, coach, I remember when you used to get on me and chew me out and, be hard on me about this and that. Boy, was I wrong back then because I get it now, and so I am, I'm where I'm at today and I am who I am today because of that, man. I'm so grateful for him, and he's hard now, a hard man to work with and work for, and he has very high standards and expectations, but you want to be the best and you want to win and you want to be at the top. It takes what it takes, and it's uncomfortable. And the hardest place to be is where you got to look yourself in the mirror and remind yourself that today you can't be comfortable with who we are and what we've done, that today's a new day and you got to come to work. You got to bring it. And he embodies that. And, dang, man, I'm so thankful and blessed to be with him, for 6 years and then be with him again. It's, we get to go to work with my best friend kind of, and then he's also kind of like a father to me in another way. So it's a pretty unique relationship now, but yeah, he taught me a ton and was awesome. And then, I got to give a shout out to Coach Miller too, Jason Miller, who's the director of Olympic sports at SEMO. And so when I was at SEMO the first time, I started as an intern, then GA for 2 years, and got hired on. I was in charge of track and field throwers and javelin, and then also wrestling. And so, I would work on the football side with Kramer, but then I was also on the Olympic side with Coach Miller. And, what he poured into me, he's been at NDSU now for dang near as close as Kramer has. So I think 15, 16 years. And before that was at Long Beach State, has been in this profession a long time. And so I had at North Dakota State, I had the two best mentors I could have ever asked for. And they're probably coaches that most people don't know, but they're two of the best men and coaches I've ever had the pleasure to be around. And, there's a reason why I came back to North Dakota State. And being able to work with these guys that truly help. When I came here, I was 24 years old, and fresh out of college. And, I have all this knowledge about how to train and, sets and reps and physiology and origins, assertions of muscles and blah, blah, blah. And, so I thought I had all the freaking answers, right? And then you get there and you realize, holy shit, I don't know anything. And they both truly made me get the curriculum, call it curriculum, but what I learned from them is truly invaluable. And I'm pretty blessed to be, Coach Jason Miller, who's the director of Olympic sports here at North Dakota State. He had a huge hand in my development. And then obviously Jim Kramer, he's, Matthew McConaughey said in a speech one time, it was for one of the awards, but basically he's chasing three things. And he's always chasing a person. And Kramer's kind of been the person that I've chased in my career professionally and who I want to be as a coach. And so to be able to, come back to that, it's been pretty sweet too.
Now that kind of led in the next question I had wrote down. I talk about it a lot, but I'm a huge Ray Hunt fan. Ray Hunt's passed now, but Ray Hunt in his book talks about he was in such a hurry to get away from his family farm and the horses his dad had and how well-mannered the horses were and how respectful the horses were. And then he got out in the world and he found out not everybody's barns are run like his dad's barn was ran. So when you left North Dakota State, you went down to SEMO, you spent some time at Northern Illinois. How hard was it to get used to different places, different ideas, making all that work, and then build what you wanted?
Yeah. So there's a lot of layers to that. Because so I was here from 11 to 16, and in those 6 years, we lost 6 games. And so for me, and young, dumb, naive, young strength coach, just coming up in the business, winning was kind of all that I knew. And my first year at SEMO, and so how I got to SEMO was the current head football coach, Tim Polasek, who just got hired back in January. We were together here at North Dakota State from 11 to 16. He left for a year, went to Northern Illinois, came back, and then was the OC with Coach Kleiman. And Polasek's another one of those guys. Like, there are so many individuals that I met at North Dakota State that have shaped me into the type of coach I am and who I am. And Tim Polasek, our head football coach, is one of those guys. So when we were together at North Dakota State, I get a call after we lost to James Madison in the semis. Still remember it like it's yesterday. Lost in the Dome. My last home game in the Fargo Dome was the loss to them, which still eats at me to this day. But I remember I was driving back from Iowa from my wife's family's place, and we were driving back to Fargo, and I get a phone call from Coach Polasek, and he's like, "Hey, my former O-line, my center from college is the O-line coach at SEMO. They're looking for a strength coach. You interested?" And so naturally, been at North Dakota State 6 years, just kind of felt like it was time for me to go out and be a guy. And I didn't want to go be an assistant. I didn't want to go be an FBS assistant. I really wanted to be an FCS head guy and kind of replicate North Dakota State. And my first year at SEMO, we went 3-8. And that was a tough pill to swallow. I was a young coach who thought first-time director, I come from North Dakota State, and there's probably a lot of coaches like me. You leave and you're so ready to prove yourself that you kind of naive to how everything works and stuff. And so that first year was tough, losing. We out of those 8 games, we lost 6 of them by a score or less. And it was just really tough because I hadn't really been accustomed from the last 6 seasons to what losing is like, and then how to handle losing, how to deal with losing. I myself, I'm a twin. My brother came out a minute before me, and we're super competitive. In fact, my family and my friends are always like, "Why are you so competitive?" It doesn't matter if we're playing dominoes, we're playing spades, we're playing NBA 2K, Call of Duty. Like, it doesn't matter. Like, I want to be the best. I want to win. And so, I've always been super competitive, and they've always, given me a hard time for just not being able to relax. I'm always competing at something. And, so that first year, just as a hyper competitive individual and you're losing, I wasn't handling losing very well. And then here I am, the head football strength coach, like, these kids are looking to me to kind of help guide them and navigate what we're going through. And that was a huge learning curve. That was something that you only get through experience, I think. And so, that was tough. Realizing the full scope of what it means to have resources and backing. And not that, the AD at Southeast Missouri State, Brady Barkey, is one of the best human beings I've ever met, one of the best ADs I've ever met. And, pretty fortunate to learn how to have a relationship with an athletic director. And, they just, at SEMO, we just didn't have the resources. We didn't have the funding. At NDSU, you have 20,000 people at the game. It's packed house. SEMO, unless it's family weekend, you got, not very many people in the stands. And so it was just, there's so many, and then, learning about money and where it comes from and how you have to get to. You can't just say, I want to go buy new racks, and then there's going to be money there from the state. Like, there's just so much that goes into it. So learning kind of all the administrative side of it was, just not something that you get from being an assistant. And so, you realize real quickly that this ain't the same. And there are a lot of times where I'd look back in that first year and be like, man, now I understand what my father Kramer was telling me, or, I was hearing from Coach Polisek, or, the elders, right, about the barn, because you're in it all the time. That's all you do. And so, within being out of there that first semester, you realize real quick that you miss that little barn. And that's true. That's how it was for me. But it was also probably the best thing for me was because I had to learn pretty quick. It's bigger than me. And no matter what, I show up on Monday, we got a squat. Doesn't matter what happened on Saturday, I got to be there for those kids. I got to be there to try to rally troops and try to create a positive experience so that we can continue to build. And then, year 2, we won 9 games, won the first ever playoff game in Southeast Missouri State football history, and did some really cool things, and, being able to go from that 3-8 season to that, my first 2 years at SEMO, I learned a ton about how things work, the politics, how to talk to people, how to build relationships, how to go out and fundraise, and how to conduct yourself when you're around boosters, like all these things that you don't really realize are a part of being a coach, but it all matters. Like, you can't just be great in the weight room and then be a jackass outside of the weight room to everybody. You have to, play, I don't say play the role, but you have to wear a lot of different hats and a lot of different functions. And, those were lessons learned at SEMO, and I felt prepared. And there's a lot of things that I had learned at North Dakota State that carried over. But yeah, man, you start seeing some other places, and you start realizing it's not all the same. Heck, I won't even get on strength conditioning Twitter anymore. Just what a toxic place. But like, you just realize there's 1,000 ways to skin a cat. Like, you can be successful running the tier method. You can be successful running Gym 1 was 5-3-1. You can be successful running kanji. You can be successful running linear periodization, block periodization, CrossFit, strongman. Like there's so many ways to get strong, to be in shape, to develop these qualities. But yeah, everyone thinks that, you know, their way is the best or this is the only way. You start going out all these places, realizing how different this place is from that place and how it's ran, or philosophy or the head coach or the philosophy of the staff or the philosophy of your boss or who the director is or whatever the case may be. And so, you learn pretty quick that there's a lot of different ways of operating, different levels of um, support and backing, from the head coach and what that looks like to have the head coach on your side. I know a lot of people who have had roles where they weren't really supported by their coaches or administration, and just hearing the horror stories about that. And so, I've been pretty lucky. I didn't have to deal with that anywhere I've been, but also realizing how important that is to being successful at the college level. Because, you know, being a Division I college strength coach is different with just all the things that you have to do. And, we could spend all day talking about the do's and don'ts and the haves and have nots and all the topics that are taboo and stuff about being a strength coach. And, obviously I'm on here wearing a freaking backwards hat and a tank top, which is, what I wear every single day. And I got a freaking dumbbell on my chain, but, everyone looks at me and, you're just a beat your chest football meathead, but you step inside the weight room and see me coach and see me pour into these athletes, whether it's football, whether it's gymnastics or baseball or throwers or whatever, and understanding that, hey, he may be a meathead, but like he kind of knows what he's talking about. But then there's, so many stereotypes. So, that was another thing you had to overcome going into a new place and kind of getting out and around is, how you carry yourself, how you come off, just understanding some of those things about yourself. But yeah, I mean, hopefully they answered your question. I feel like I'm just kind of rambling here, but there's a lot of things that you learn when you go to the next place.
Yeah. And sometimes you're looking at it from where you're at, if, and thinking, well, if I had control, I would do this. And if I had control, I would do that. And then sometimes you get out there and you do have the control when you find out that maybe those ideas weren't that great.
Oh, I experienced that all too well. I freaking left and it's like, I will never do X, Y, and Z that we did at North Dakota State. And then it's like I'm sitting there, I'm like, oh, I'm actually doing this because it's what's the most efficient, even though I thought I had figured out that it wasn't. It's you gotta, but you gotta learn those lessons. I think that's part of growing up as a coach too. But yeah, there's a lot of things I realized, like, oh, I thought I wasn't going to do this anymore, and then here I am still doing it. So,
Well, you talked about it kind of in there a little bit, and we can expand on it. But at the end of the day, we love strength and conditioning. We love the results. We love what we see on the field. All of that stuff. That's amazing to watch. You win and lose with your athletes. But if you're not a good mentor and leading them in the right direction, are you kind of missing the boat?
Absolutely. The impact that we have on individuals on a daily basis as a strength coach, being able to, because when you think about the weight room, consistency, accountability, effort, intentionality, all these things that you don't really think about, but put together help make you successful in life. Like when you go into the real world, and these kids graduate college or graduate high school, are they ready for what's next? And so I think as a strength coach, like you have to have the athletes at the forefront, and make it where it's about creating an experience for these kids and helping mentor them through these problems so they can be better. The best, one of the best examples of kind of that I've ever had was a former athlete of ours, D tackle, is a walk on, ended up earning a scholarship, becoming a team captain. And married, has kids, working a fantastic job that he loves. And he came back and saw us, and he was talking. He goes, one of the things that bothers me about most people that I'm around are they're just comfortable being in their role. But you guys taught us to always be pushing ourselves, to be accountable, be consistent, do what we say we're going to do, show up and do the work. And he goes, I find myself passing people in my profession because I want to be the best. I want to strive to be a great employee, great husband, a great father. And and he's like, you guys taught me that. He's like, it was the things that you did and said and taught us as athletes here that have prepared me to be this. And those are the kind of stories I love hearing. Like, that's probably one of the highlights of my career, is hearing when those athletes come back and say, hey, I understand that you were more than just a weight room, that you were trying to help me and truly cared about me. And that's what being a great strength coach is, in my opinion. And there's a lot of people that may say differently, and I don't necessarily want to get into that, get on my soapbox there, but I think that we're such a lucky position as strength coaches to be able to affect individuals in such a positive way, and that's what ultimately it's why I coach. Like, how freaking the world's crazy, right? How do you make it a better place? Well, every day I pour myself into these 18 and 22-year-old kids, and they're going to have bad days. They're going to girlfriend's going to break up with them, or they don't have money, or they got bad in school and parents are mad, or whatever. And they just need someone to help them and to guide them and to kind of get them through it. And we get to do that. And so I think that's pretty special. And I think that's what makes the great ones great. I think if you talk to any player that had a great coach, they tell you, they're thankful for holding them accountable, walking them through the storm, and being there for them when they need them. So I make sure to try to do that every single day to my athletes and anyone that I meet, and administration, to the janitors, those types of people. It's always, hey, thank you. I really appreciate all you do. Make someone's day better, and just have a genuine appreciation for the people around us that help us do our jobs every day, and get to do what we love to do. I mean, it takes an army, and there's a lot of things that go into what we do every day. I mean, you're a gym owner, so probably more than most, like, before the gym opens and before it closes, there's so much other stuff that has to get taken care of that people don't even see. And having those people around that you can trust to run a business and do all these things, it makes a difference. It really does.
Now, that actually leads into this very well, I think. But I was reading an article, and I believe it was on North Dakota State's website. They were interviewing you about different things, and you were talking about Kramer and Kramer's influence and all the unsung things he does with meals and stuff like that. And then you started learning that and taking on those roles. Well, creating a servant leadership type environment, I mean, we don't get to see, the outside public don't get to see all the things you do that are not related to strength and conditioning. So creating that environment where athletes see that and want to be a part of it and buy into something bigger than them, what all goes into that?
Well, that's there's I'll kind of start at North Dakota State and then kind of work through some different places I've been, because that's evolved a ton as I've gotten older, right? As you get older and kind of grow in your role. But when you look at, so anytime that we go on the road, we have to eat. And so it's our job, at least here at North Dakota State and at SEMO, was to set up all the meals at the hotel, set up the meals, post-game meals. So I would, talk with the hotel staff, and here's what we want. And okay, it costs how much per plate? All right, well, here's my budget. So here's what I got to cut. Or, luckily at North Dakota State, we didn't have to worry about that as much. But, so it's just about making sure the food shows up on time. I mean, you're sitting there in the fourth quarter trying to keep guys back on the sideline, call up special teams, see what's going on. But then in the back of your mind, you're like, all right, has my phone vibrated yet? Like, is the food here? Who's going to run up, go get the food? So usually it was me or one of the other GAs at the time. And then as I became the assistant, then it was the GA, they'd run up and get the food, have to miss the last, 4 or 5 minutes of the game to make sure that the food is set up by the locker room and ready to go. If we travel on the plane, on a bus, making sure there's food and water and Gatorade. And a lot of times that's putting in the back of your truck and driving it over there. Stocking the fueling station every day. We don't have a bunch of army of minions who can do that. Last thing I did today was take over the bananas, granola bars, peanut butter jelly sandwiches that we made, all that stuff over to the Fargo Dome, which isn't that far, but you load up in your truck, unload it, take it down, load it in there. Um, just a different situation. At SEMO, we had our fueling station that I had developed. It really was like a restaurant. So we had 4 griddles, and the guys could make bacon, eggs, omelets, pancakes. We had waffle makers. We had chicken patties and burgers, so they'd come in and make chicken patties or burgers for lunch. And so I was basically running a restaurant, and so I was in charge of ordering all that food. And before we got in the U.S. Foods contract, I would have to, me or my staff would have to drive my truck out to Sam's, load it all up. People looking at us like we're crazy because we got 3 carts full of food. Drive it back, put it out, take inventory, run the budget, cleaning. Having to kind of clean our own facility at SEMO, which just kind of goes into it. You take pride in your stuff, and so you want to make sure it always looks good and it's presented well. To anytime. So like here at North Dakota State, we have catered meals on Tuesday and Wednesday nights. And so, we set the tables, and then at the end of the night, like we pull all the trash and put everything back. And so, there's just so many things that go into making that experience for the coaches and athletes seamless. And, and then just the phone calls, right? One year, on December 23rd, actually, I get a phone call from one of my athletes that another athlete's brother had been murdered, and it happened in Kansas City in Liberty. And so, I was at the dinner with my family, and I got up and I left to go be with him and to make sure that he had someone there to be there. To the phone calls that you get. We had a guy call me the other day just to catch up and see how I was doing. And just all the different things, and multiple times helping guys come to my office to talk about problems that they don't want to talk to their position coach about because they don't want it to affect playing time. And so, there's just being a strength coach, and I was the same way when I was young. And I was lucky. My mentors, Justin Snyder at Simpson College. And, I was at an Air Force Academy for a year as an intern when I graduated college and before North Dakota State. And, Matt McGettigan out there and Kim Pinsky out there. I was lucky to have been around strength coaches that kind of had been around a while and talked to me about some of that stuff and what that stuff means, and that being a strength coach is truly so much bigger than just a weight room. Because like when I graduated college, and I've seen it a lot too with just GAs and interns, it's all about how do we get the squat better. Well, frick, I could care less about your 1 rep max on squat. It takes a powerlifter 12 to 16 weeks to peak for a 1 rep test of strength. Like, that's not realistic. I want to raise your floor. You had Windler on the podcast, and I'm a huge Windler guy. I thought I had seen every interview he did until I found the one he did with you, which, the guy's my idol, but like he talks about raising the floor, right? Like 10 rep strength, 8 rep strength, 6 rep strength, 4 rep strength. Those things matter more than a 1 rep squat. How does he move on the field? And does stuff relate to the field? Like I had the O-line coach today. He's doing a clinic talk, and he wanted, why do we do some of the things that we do at the runs and lifts that carry over the field? Because he knows that what we're doing carries over the field. And like, there's so much more than just stats and reps and strength. It's how do these things matter to the field? How are we helping them, prepare them for different moments in life? It's just, that's the thing. Hey, write me a workout program. I can get anyone strong in 10 weeks. I think you and I could take anybody off the street, make them probably move better, look better, and be stronger given 10 weeks, 2 days a week of consistency, right? It's all the other stuff that goes into creating a successful environment, a positive environment for that person to want to come back twice a week for 10 weeks. and it's how you get that person to truly buy in to what we're trying to accomplish, because those are all skill sets you have to have. And if you don't have those, and if you don't think about those things, how are you going to be a great strength coach? Because why is someone going to listen to you if they don't feel like you truly care? So they're going to stop showing up, or they're not going to, and so again, I can get anyone strong in 10 weeks, but getting them to have lifestyle changes, habit changes, see real results that last, and, make an impact on the way they think and act and live their life going forward. I mean, that's a whole nother skill set. And if you don't realize and recognize, like, that's probably bigger part of it than the weight room. I tell all my GAs and interns, the actual weight room is 20% of being a strength coach. It's all these other things that go into it.
I can think of two realizations that hit me really hard when I started doing this, right? So I had a kid out here lifting, good wrestler. He actually took fifth in the Division II national tournament this year. So really, really good wrestler. But we were out here lifting, and you never had to ask him to get under the bar. He was always ready, And I'm like, hey, man, what are you doing? He's like, I'm talking to a coach. And I'm like, your comp coach? Let's lift. He goes, no, Oregon State. Well, that hit me really hard. Like, holy crap, I have to be better than what I am, because this kid's got D1 dreams that he's putting in to this place. And if I'm not capable of helping that, I let him down. So that was one. But what you're getting into there was he was making a run for a state title. He took third 3 years. And the first place had always eluded him. We were going hard. I felt I had a good program for him. He was looking good, but the mental stress and the practices and the weights and all that was just like caving in on him.
Mm-hmm.
Picking up on that and totally reworking how we did things, to fit his mental state was way more important than the weights. And if I wouldn't have had those two experiences in my life, I don't know that I would totally grasp what you're saying. But having that and seeing that, yes, that's a huge contributor to being the strength coach.
100%. It's just, and that's where I think I get frustrated with, like, the younger generation of coaches a little bit. It's because you have to have experiences to learn that stuff. But, like you said, I mean, you could write the world's best program, right? Like, the Russians will want to sign you to go, because it's the greatest thing they've ever seen since the Soviet bloc days, right? But if you can't create buy-in, it's the worst program. I mean, not to dog on anything, CrossFit takes a lot of heat, whatever people's beliefs are. But one of the things that CrossFit does best is it gets people to believe in what they're doing is going to make a difference. And so they commit fully to it and have success. And, us on the outside, we may look at it and be like, what is this program? And how does it work? Because it's a bunch of things thrown together. It doesn't make sense in our head of exercise, physiology, etc. But yet they're getting all these results, and we're over here, fighting for our life to get people to come work out with us. And it's just about, creating buy-in and creating an excitement and actual engagement to what it is. Best program, worst program. You can get better results on the worst program if you got a coach that the athletes or the population believe in and love and care for. That's why they have success. And so, I try to beat that into the heads of all my interns and GAs. Like, you just got to realize that there's so much more to it than what you think is the perfect program on paper. And if you're always chasing the perfect program on paper, then you're chasing the wrong things.
That's the one thing you could say about CrossFit is it's very much a community. It's bigger than the gym. They do stuff after the gym together. They do a lot of stuff together. So it's almost like a club more so than just a gym.
Yep, for sure.
Now, looking back at all the different things you've coached, I've got a kid here now. He's a javelin
Mm-hmm.
thrower. He's doing really well. Big dreams ahead of him. You coached Olympic throwers.
Mm-hmm.
What are some key takeaways to help throwers improve?
Ooh. So when I was working with the throwers here, I was working with he's the throws coach at Nebraska now, Justin St. Clair. Probably one of the best coaches. Like his understanding of throwing, and not just throwing javelin, which is what he threw, but shot, disc, hammer, second to none. Um, and working with them, like I learned a lot more about like not necessarily programming, but like strength and strength expression as a whole working with them. Um, the throwers would gain 60 pounds their freshman year. I mean, they were crushing food at the dining center, but then they were getting really strong really fast. And, mass moves mass and young, untrained kid, right? But some of the biggest things that I would, probably, that kind of took away that was profound, how much like, call it core training, torso training, ab training, right? But when you talk about how to train your midsection as a chain through your whole body, it's more than just planks or weighted sit-ups or whatever. I mean, there's just so many exercises and things that we were doing to, and just the amount of range of motion you have to cock back, to block with your leg, and to completely open up, and all that goes into it. That just doesn't happen. You have to train that, and especially at those velocities. Especially for javelin, they're going into a full sprint, and then boom, dropping that front side leg, and all this energy is pent up. And if you're not dialed in, you're releasing it through your freaking, through some of the smallest joints in your body, which is why, javelin throwers and throwers have a lot of issues with elbows and stuff like that. But to get into those positions required a ton of strength. And we did everything from, barbell twist with the weight on one side to different like rotational movements to really, kind of connect everything. And so for a long time, I thought all that stuff was kind of BS. That was, this all connects and blah, blah, blah. It's like, yeah, whatever, just get strong. But I was working with throwers and understanding kind of how all that played together. Huge, I call it torso training because, training the whole cylinder, the abs, the obliques, the low back erectors, etc. But then just tying that into movements that carry over to throwing. Another thing, so you don't think about this. How many throws does a thrower take a day? Okay. And every day they throw from the same side. And some of them do multiple events. And so you constantly have rotation to one side and a block leg and a drive leg, for lack of better terms. And if you think of how many times they're blocking on that block leg a day, and that joint and that low back to SI joint's constantly getting smashed down, right? And, learning, for me, it was learning, okay, there's an issue here because of the nature of the sport. Same thing with wrestlers, guys that are one leg dominant, when you watch them squat, all of a sudden they have a little shift in their hips. And so it was learning like that was a thing, not just, sorry about that text, not just like there's a real reason why this is happening biomechanically and physiologically. Like, so having to learn that and understand what all that meant, and then how to fix it, and how to address those issues so that we can, I don't want to say correct it, because you're not correcting a compensation pattern that, it has been taking place for 20 years. Um, so how do you manage it, improve upon those qualities so that it's not a factor? And as a young coach, like, it really it sent me down um, a path of, this learning adventure. I call it my vision quest because I'm a big wrestling guy. Of just, how the body works, how it's all goes together. And, I've jacked up myself pretty good, but, how to kind of unjack yourself up, kind of like Dave Tate talks about. And so, working with the throwers, I really had to learn, how to be more than just a weight room guy, but, flexibility and mobility, how to manipulate tissues, and, got really big into Donnie Thompson and, temperate body tempering, and, trying that stuff on myself and my throwers, and, being able to learn that stuff. I got there because of working with throwers, because I had issues, Peyton Iredall, who was in the Olympics. I was fortunate enough to coach him. He was in the Olympic finals. He took, I think, eighth at the last outdoor Olympics in the shot put. And I remember there was a year where, it was trap bar deadlift and reverse band box bucks. His back was so jacked up just because from so much torque and rotation. And so, seeing that and having them kind of work him through that. And then here he is, years later, freaking throwing in the Olympic finals. Like, and so it was just learning how to manage those things was huge. And then the amount of power production work that you have to do with throwers. I mean, it's a lot of plyometrics. Throwers are a lot like strongmen. You don't realize how athletic you have to be. And, you have to have a certain amount of movement qualities and be able to sprint and do these things that go into being a thrower. You just think, oh, launch things far and lift heavy stuff, but there's so much more to it. And Justin St. Clair was big, in the Russian, Rachansky and Bondarchuk and those guys. And so I started reading a lot of that stuff, and just the amount of plyometric work that the Russians did that we were doing for the throwers. I was just like, I kind of thought it was the last night. I mean, it was just, freaking 50, 75 jumps a session. But, then when you look at the success we had and the success that the individuals had, we had a javelin thrower who took second and fifth in the nation. And then, same thing with some shot players and stuff. And so, having success, obviously something's going right. So, but those are probably the three biggest things: is torso training, and then how all that stuff kind of connects. I mean, and then mobility, javelin throwers. We were doing, dude, this scared the heck out of me now. Okay. So you're laying on a bench, and we had this like overhang. I'm talking probably 15 feet up. It's up there, 12 to 15 feet. So the javelin thrower is laying on the edge of the bench, arms overhead, and partners above dropping a med ball, and they catch the med ball, bring it all the way back, and then snap it back up to them 12 feet in the air. It's a 4-pound med ball, right? But I was like, someone's shoulder's going to rip off. But when you throw a javelin, the amount of velocity and torque that goes into it, you have to prepare for it. We have to prep our tissues, ligaments, and joints, and so like some of that stuff that you don't even think about, we talk about with football, right? Like we got to condition the tendons, ligaments, and joints. That's why we do football movements and conditioning to get the groins and the tendons and ligaments used to backpedaling and open and doing these things. Like if you go out there and do it after not doing it, yeah, you're going to wake up the next day and your freaking groins are going to be on fire because they're not used to doing those movements. And so prepping javelin throwers for mobility and torque production, brother, I mean, the amount of times I almost had a heart attack watching some of that stuff, but, getting into it and learning it and seeing how it all worked, man, I was, all right, a lot of respect, because being a javelin thrower is not easy, and it takes a ton of work. So that was a really long way to get there.
No, you laid down some incredibly cool stuff, and I took a few notes on that. So, first of all, I've heard people talk about that with hitters, like baseball, softball. You got to unring them in the off season because they get so wrapped up one direction that, yeah, if you don't get them back to some sort of baseline, you're asking for trouble.
Yep.
But the other thing you said in there, and I actually think I had a question on this further down, but mass moves mass, right?
Yep.
You brought that up, and everybody throws that out there. So my question is why do we see the linebackers and fullbacks and guys like that moving more weight than a lot of our big linemen?
Okay. I'm glad you asked this. I love this. This is so when you look at, first off, you got to look at kind of the different, I don't want to say positions, but body types, at the end of the day, I think genetically, power production wise, all these things, when you look at a linebacker, you look at a O lineman, there are certain, I'm trying to think about the best way to say it, determining factors, I guess, where you're going to have some of those athletes and body types that are, very type 1, really strong, and, had that ability to lift heavy and be really strong for a lighter body weight. And then you look at like an old lineman, who may not be as strong, but when we look at not, you look at just basic physics, um, if a 240-pound rock and a 300-pound rock are coming at each other down two sides of the hill and they're going to meet in the middle, which one's going to win? The laws of inertia and physics, are going to lean towards the more mass can ultimately create more inertia. And so when you talk about like, linemen, their job is to get out in front and with movement and then either stonewall a guy or make it so that he can't get around you and or drive block him. And so, I think just the role of the position and what you need to have, and how forces and leverages work. I think, that's why one of the best left tackles I've ever seen. He had a 10-year NFL career, never benched more than 315. But he was out there in the NFL for 10 years, blocking Aaron Rodgers' blindside for the Packers for a while. Billy Turner, is down in Miami. He's been around. And, like, dude, freaking, he's a 315-pound, 6'8" man that maybe wasn't the strongest, but he could move you. He had great feet. He had great hips. He knew how to get his hips under your hips. I mean, when you look at wrestling, right? Like, I could be bigger than you and have a tough time throwing you if I don't understand that I can't. If my hips are above your hips, I'm not going to be able to lift you. But if I drop my hips under your hips, as long as I get my arms around you, I'm going to get your feet flying up, feet over top of your head. I'm going to freaking drop you. And, so understanding leverages and those types of things, I think that's why, you see linemen who maybe aren't as strong, but because they're bigger and they have better leverages and they're able to use those leverages to their advantage, can still move that 240-pound guy who maybe squats more than him, is more explosive, but, his hip level may not be as low, or if his hip level is as low and they're coming together, you don't typically see a stronger 240-pound guy run over that guy if they have the same leverages. Now, leverages are different, physics different, those things change, but at its core, mass ultimately moves mass. Now, that's not to say that that's how we want our linemen to be, but like with our throwers, how many Olympic shot putters do you see that weigh less than 300 pounds? I mean, look at strongmen. you look at the strongman competition. I mean, I've watched every World's Strongest Man since the '80s. Bill Kazmaier is goated, and they screwed him out of multiple World's Strongest Man titles by kicking him out because he was so dominant. But outside in the last probably 20 years, I think last year was Mitchell Hooper, who's not the biggest, but he's still freaking 300 plus pounds. Novikov from Ukraine, when he gets in the lineup next to Brian Shaw, he looks small, but he's still, almost 300 pounds, 300 plus pounds. You got Brian Shaw and Thor, 6'8", 400 pounds, like, world's strongest man. Those guys are huge, and there's a, certain limit to enough mass to move mass. Now you have to have a certain amount of strength and other qualities to go along with it, but hopefully that answers your question. I get that one a lot. I have a lot of conversations with people about that topic, and why is it that I may be stronger, but he can kick my butt in the wrestling match or what have you. And there's just so much more that goes into it than just the raw strength as well. Hopefully that answers that question for you.
Yeah, it's one I've been wanting to ask for a while, and I figured you were the guy to ask, and it worked out really well for me, so I got lucky. But going into that a little further, you were a wrestler. You were a good wrestler. You work with O-line guys. You work with big throwers. How important is isometrics in those positions, because they spend so much time in an isometric state or quasi-isometric state?
So I'm gonna be 100% honest with you. I hate isometrics. With wrestling, it's different. Wrestling, I did some isometric stuff because of the nature of the sport. And you probably argue that all natures of all sports have some sort of isometric, eccentric, and concentric phases. But me personally, like, I'm not a big fan of ISO holds and where you're pulling the bar against the pins and doing isometric. That's not something I'm into. It's just not my philosophy. I do believe in prepping the tissues to the sport. So, like, for football, in a given game, you're going to take, if you're a starter, 65 to 85 plays. And so every play you're getting in some form of a squat position. And so in my higher volume phases, we're going to do 80 plus reps of some sort of squatting movement. Like on squat day, we'll do 8 sets of 5 squats and then 5 by 10 RDLs, 95 reps total. And then on clean deadlift days, we're going to clean grip deadlift 8 by 5 and then 5 by 10 front squats. And then as we get into our strength phases, obviously the reps drop. But in my hypertrophy phases, we're still prepping the tissues. And so I look at it that way. Throwers, it's been a while since I've worked with throwers, but with them, I wouldn't say so much isometrics, but getting into those positions, because you're never really in an isometric position as a thrower. You're always rotating. But with wrestlers, I would do some time things. So I guess you'd call it isometrics, where they're in those positions, for like 3 minutes, right? Maybe like, we had a little series where we would do, like 3 minutes of lunge walks, right? Or 3 minutes, stance holds, or 30, do it blast like that. So wrestling is probably the only sport that I did use some isometrics in. But probably a hot take for a lot of people. I'm a old school mentality. Kramer learned a lot. Craig Bowl, who was the first head coach for NDSU in Division I era, he actually just retired from Wyoming. And he was the defensive coordinator for Osborne at Nebraska. And so his big thing was kind of that old Boyd Epley, Nebraska power. I still have the video from YouTube. I should send it to you. It's freaking fantastic. It's from the 80s. They're talking about squatting and push press and, conditioning and how ATP works in the sport of football and some of that stuff. But, I've always been like, I don't do a lot of eccentric tempo stuff. Our time under tension comes from our repetitions. Like I said, I'm a huge Jim Wendler guy. We run 5-3-1. Basically, to it, I've adapted it some just from my experience, but I've been doing 5-3-1 for the better part of 14 years now. I learned about Windler back in 2000, whatever it was. I was in college from '06 to 2010, somewhere in there. And then it wasn't until I think 13, 14 when I got done with my Olympic lifting phase where did a competition, just wanted to do it. To say I did it just like I did a powerlifting meet. And I actually did a semi quasi CrossFit thing for what that was worth. Just to say I did it. But yeah, no, I don't really do tempos or eccentrics. We're gonna, be strong. Now we're gonna do stuff under the chute for O linemen and put them in those positions where they're having to hold a knee bend for time. So yeah, that's isometrics, but I don't kind of there's no set isometric kind of protocols that I've really used. It's more just kind of happened organically or from things that we're doing or things that I've taken from other people. But yeah. So I don't know. I'm just not that guy.
Well, let's take it 180. And then you brought up Boyd Epley in Nebraska, and I'm sure you know I'm a huge Nebraska fan. So all that plays in. Plus, I'm a huge Windler fan. But growing up around here, I'm sure you can remember back when you were younger, running into old Big 8 guys that played at K-State or guys that played somewhere and talking about the things Boyd Epley was doing at Nebraska. And I can remember a lot of them guys talking about their linemen did more plyometrics than everybody else's position guys. So for force absorption and force production, how much plyometrics do you do with your linemen?
Funny you should say that. We actually probably do more plyometric stuff with our lineman, D lineman, than I do with the other positions. Again, got that one from great Nebraska. But so much of O line, D line is about the hips, like the projection of the hips. And so yeah, we do. So like with O line and D line, we would do box jumps for height. So from a seated position, straight up, and then box broad jumps. Then we do our broad jump series, bounding series, and then we did one of my power complexes, whatever, I don't know, probably not what right word to call it, but just what I call it so it makes sense in my head. O lineman, D lineman would do a set of 5 repetitions on glute bridges with a decently heavy load. I mean, not super crazy heavy, but like we start at 275, then 315, then 365. So you do 5 reps where you're squeezing and driving a set bar. And then we go to the jammer machines. We sell the old school jammers at North Dakota State, doing 5 rep jammers, about 225 to 245, or I don't know, that's the weight, but that's 2 plates, 2 wheels on each side, and a 45. And then we do what we call kneeling chest pass extension, where it's a 12-pound or 14-pound med ball. You're on your knees, you load up your hips, and then you basically do a flying Superman by launching your hips to launch the ball. And so it's a hip series or hip power. I call it power complex to make sense, but that's what we did with our alignment for plyometric work. And it's all because we want to be able to have powerful and explosive hips. O linemen, especially the way the game is going now, that it's changing a little bit. Where you have to be. I mean, look at Jason Kelsey, for example. One of the greatest centers that ever played because his movement skills are so good. He's a little undersized, but he can still block everybody because he had strong hips and understood how to leverage his hips and use your hips. I mean, as wrestlers, we understand, what leverage can do for you and how doesn't matter how strong you are. I mean, my wrestling coach, who was a 141 pounder, tossed me more than anyone else did because he knew how to get underneath my hips and launch me, even though I was, shit he did to me when I was 200 pounds. I saw him, he was 150 pounds. I'm 245 pounds, and we're at the bar, and he sees me, comes up, and here I go, heels over ass, and I look up, I'm like, and he's, 10, 15 years old. I'm like, old man, he still do that, and so, yeah, I think it's super important. I think, it's why we're a team that runs the football, and runs it pretty well, and I think you have to have that in there, and so, yeah, we definitely do more plyometrics with them or plyometric type stuff or power production stuff, force production stuff. Then the skill positions. Now, on the flip side of that, our skill guys do way more max velocity sprinting than our O linemen. And so, really when you talk force production, which is more forceful, max sprinting or max jumping. So you can make the case that both groups are getting similar amounts of force production output. It's just how that force production output is seen. Max velocity sprinting is plyometric training. You can't change my mind on that. Anytime you're doing maximal velocity, dealing with the hips and force, it's a plyometric drill. But, in my opinion, would take it for what it's worth, but that's just kind of how I look at it.
Now you're talking about box jumping your big guys. Do you find that gives you increased mobility because of the way they catch at top boxes, while they may not be absorbing the force really well on those high boxes, they're gaining increased mobility?
Yeah. I mean, it's hard not to just look at it that way. I mean, when we talk about pad level and the ability to get into full squat positions and absorb force, I mean, 100%. Now, I think, there's a way to bastardize box jumps, and if you're trying to go for max height and just trying to, use your hip flexibility to get up there, I think as long as you're using your hips properly to produce that force, absolutely, because now we've gotten full extension and produced force, and now we have to absorb force in those, compromised positions. It doesn't mean we're always looking for things to improve hip flexibility, just from even doing simple things like front plate raises where you're sitting ass to grass squat to improve that mobility, because quite frankly, stretching with a band is not going to create long life. I mean, your hamstring is so freaking dense. You think laying there for 30 seconds and stretching a hamstring is truly going to make a difference? Now, over time, yes. But if you're talking about actually creating change in the tissue and the mitochondria and being able to get into those positions, you have to. And so, the box jumps, it's an added benefit of box jumps. I mean, they've been around forever, and clearly they work because they've been around for a very long time. But as long as you're using the right way, you can get their big bang for your buck exercise. I mean, because you're getting force production, you're getting max effort, which just getting an athlete to learn how to maximally exert himself is a learning curve that needs to happen. And then on the added flip side of that, you have the force absorption and the landing mechanics and the body's ability to get into those positions that you're going to get into probably on the field, but that you may not be able to get into in training. I mean, now call me a homer, Kansas City guy. I'm a huge Chiefs fan. Obviously a huge Pat Mahomes fan. And I think, he's shown a lot of his training videos recently, and some of the stuff you're just like, wow, that's wild. But then you look and you watch the game film and you're like, freaking genius, right? Like, you have to be able to prep the tissues and ligaments in those challenged positions, and catching a high box jump for a offensive defensive lineman is going to put them in a challenging position. But guess what? They're probably going to find themselves in a similar position on the football field at some point throughout the course of their career. And because we've done those exercises, they're going to be more resilient. Our job as strength coaches isn't to make them actually, Ben Herbert, who's now the strength coach for the Chargers, I actually just saw it on Twitter, the interview he had done, and he said it a lot more eloquent than me, but basically, I'm trying to make you harder to be broken. Like, that's our job. It's not to make you the strongest cat in the world, but make you the most resilient cat, right? Like, how can I make it so that it's so hard for you to break down so you can continue to play and be durable and those types of things? And so, if you're not thinking about those things when you're programming exercises, you're probably doing it wrong. And, I'm really glad you kind of brought that up, because most people, when they look at box jumps, they just think about it from one perspective. But when you look at the whole movement itself, there's so many different parts to it that lend itself to that's applicable on the field in a lot of different sports. And it's easy to see on Twitter and have a Twitter war about are box jumps good or bad. Everything's good and bad at the same time, just where it's in its place. And, context is everything and how you utilize it's everything. But yes, the way we do them, it's definitely something that I'm looking at is that flexibility piece that comes from being in those, ranges of motion.
Now, building on what you said there just a second ago, and I'd never really thought about it with athletes maybe quite this way. I always thought about it with horses is you can't hide them from that exposure. And you better do it where you can kind of somewhat control it, like exposing a horse to something that might get you bucked off. I want to do it in the barn. You know what I mean? I want to do it in the round pit.
Oh, yeah.
I don't want to do it chasing a cow out in the pasture. Same with athletes. If you can kind of control that, but still expose them, you're going to be better off than just having it happen in a game and then everything going to crap.
One of the best at that is Kurt Hester, who's at Houston now. My guy who GA'd with me, he actually got a chance to work with Hester at La Tech, and they have a lot of contact prep stuff. And first time I saw it, I was like, "What is going on?" Like they're hitting themselves on the forearms with PVC pipes. But it's like, you think UFC, MMA, boxers, and all the training of seeing guys, taking punches to the abs. Well, you have to build up scar tissue. You have to prep the tissues just like you do mobility purposes for contact purposes as well. And so, there's just so many layers to looking at training athletes that you got to think about now that, you probably don't see. And so it's just part of the ever-growing, profession, the ever-evolving profession is that we have to, as strength coaches, we have to understand movement. We have to understand what their bodies are going to go through so that we can, prep them for that. And like you said, I'd rather find out in the barn, in the weight room. I'd rather have them exposed to it, and so that way when it happens on the field, we can, I don't call it injury prevention, I call it injury reduction, but hopefully we can reduce the likelihood that something bad is going to happen to you on the field. So 100%.
Well, I know we've been on this thing quite a while, and I'll kind of start wrapping up now so you can enjoy your night.
Oh, no, you're good. I got plenty of time.
I like talking this stuff, and sometimes you can keep a guy too long. He's got other things to do, I understand. But we'll kind of go way back in the interview for this question. But you talked about, when you went to SEMO, all you did was win until you got to SEMO, and then you had to handle the losses. Well, at North Dakota State, all you do is win. How do you keep your guys locked in where they don't take the wins for granted?
Yeah. So love this question. There's a lot of layers to this I've learned. Number one, and this is, crazy, but it starts with our football recruiting model. So at North Dakota, and I'm gonna hear about this. Everyone's gonna say, "Well, you're North Dakota State, so you can pick those guys." Okay. Well, North Dakota State, 3 years before we won the first national championship, was a 3-8 football team. Okay, went 3-8, 6-5, 9-5 when they lost to Eastern Washington in semis, and then the dynasty started. So I don't want to hear that. Coach Bowles' mentality was, we are going to recruit maybe not the best player on the worst team, but we're going to recruit really good football players who love football on winning teams. So, like, you recruit a kid from, Rockhurst, right? And let's say they've won the last 5. You may not be taking their best player. He may be, a kind of second tier guy, but the kid loves football. He knows how to win. He understands how hard it is to win. Or if you go, let's say, I don't take another school at that level, Park Hill. let's say Park Hill, for the last 5 years has been really bad. Well, you recruit the best player on that team, who all he's known is 3-8. What does he care about? Does he love the game? Is he willing to commit to the game to win, or is it just about him and getting his stats? Because now all of a sudden, those are two different people, two different mindsets, two different experiences. Um, and then those are hard to break. I've been working at SEMO, and I love SEMO to death, but we recruited some of the best players on losing teams. They didn't quite respect how hard winning 10 games a year is. But you get the kid from Kimberly, Wisconsin, who got passed up by Minnesota and Wisconsin because he's 5'10" and not 6'2". But the kid understands the value of winning, how hard it is to win, how hard you have to work to win. That kid is going to be more resilient when you are losing. And so one of the things, and first and foremost, is just the type of kid that we recruit here at North Dakota State. And being some different parts of the country, I can honestly say that there's some validity to that. Even if it's a kid on an 8-man team, he understands how hard it is to win year in and year out. On the flip side of that, how do you, kind of answer your question? How do you, kind of get them through the losing? I wasn't here with North Dakota State last year, but North Dakota State lost 4 games. They lost to UND, USD, and NDSU. They were the 4th best team in the Dakotas for the first time in forever, right? And, after talking to some of the seniors and guys that graduated that came back, kind of what they went through, it's about leadership. It's about, there's a brotherhood and a legacy that, and a pride in being a Bison. And then that is taught to you by the older guys. And the older guys teach you to respect what it takes to win. And then as you get older, when you do lose, you lean on, you never really raise to a superstar level. You always fall back on your training. That's what they say, right? And because there's been that built-in leadership and that built-in belief in each other and kind of process that, hey, it's a new week. You go back to work and you work even harder. And so man, that's a tough. There's a lot of layers to that because it starts with your culture. What the hell is culture? I mean, frick, you hear that all the time. It's what's embodied by your players and your staff. And there has to be a certain sense of pride that comes with the organization. Coach Polisek, our head football coach, he was the O-line coach at the University of Iowa for a number of years. And, he always said University of Iowa is one of the most unique places in the world because they're not hanging banners every year, but every year they win 9 or 10 games and make it to a bowl game. I mean, look at last year. Freaking Iowa's OC, who's the head coach's son, gets fired because he didn't put up enough stats, but yet they still had a winning record. That's respecting how hard it is to win. Not even to win national championships, just to win at a high level. And so, say what you want about University of Iowa, and I'm not the biggest University of Iowa fan. But gosh dang, they always have a winning season, 7, 8, 9, 10 wins every year. Like you can put your hat on it. It may not be pretty, and it may piss a lot of people off how they got there, but gosh darn, they win and they respect winning. Same thing at North Dakota State. You respect how hard it is to win. Craig Bohl, when he was at Nebraska, he talked about this, that why Nebraska was so good for so long, because it was just the embodiment of the coaching staff, the athletic department, the coaching staff, the players, that this is who we are, this is what we do. And when it's not going away, we go back to our roots, we go back to what we started on and what we fall back on. And that's the brotherhood of, you look at, Nebraska and the Black Shirts, Iowa and Pound the Rock. I mean, you look at all these places, Alabama and Nick Saban, like, how do you have that continued success? And it's because it's an embodiment by everybody in the organization that when things are going bad, and it's gonna happen, you link arms and you move forward together. You don't point the finger. And quite honestly, been a part of programs where, when things are hitting the fan, people are pointing fingers. And that's why they don't win consistently and have a hard time. And, not one person's in charge of that. It's gotta be an all-encompassing thing that's permeated from the head ball coach on down. So probably a long answer there, but for us as strength coaches, we just got to make sure that we show up every day and be a beacon, for these guys, something to look forward to. It's you got to come in with a certain level of energy and call it persona or what have you. That all right, shit hit the fan, good. I'm right here with you. We're going to lock arms and we're going to continue to move forward. Then you go out to practice. It's the same way, right? Head ball coach, hey, we're all going to look to get better. We're all going to look to bounce back. And here's how we're going to do it. We're going to trust each other. And we're going to lock arms and we're going to do it. We're not going to point fingers. And so it's hard because you don't know what that really looks like until you've seen it. I've kind of been on both sides of it and seen it both ways. And I can definitely tell you which side I prefer and why it's so special. But also how damn hard it is to create that, because not one person changes the culture. It takes a lot of people with one vision or a similar vision pulling on the rope the same way to bring about that change. And it's got to come, from everybody. If you want long-term success, Bill Belichick, Tom Brady and the Patriots, Nick Saban at Alabama. You look at the All Blacks rugby team. You look at, the New York Yankees, right? Why do people hate these teams? Because they just win. Now, a lot of things that go into it, money, resources, blah, blah, blah. But at the end of the day, there's that pride, and there's something about being, it used to be something about saying you were from the New England Patriots. There's something about being a Yankee. Like that was the pinnacle of the career, right? Like you don't get to call yourself an all-black rugby player without going through a whole lot, and then to be there when there's a bunch of dudes that are just as good as you behind you if you slip up that can take you, and so it's just about kind of building all that into it, I think. And so, it's interesting because you asked that question, and I love that question because it's not easy to answer, but when you've been fortunate enough, and I'm probably one of the most blessed people on the planet, kind of the situation I was able to get into with North Dakota State, you get to see some of that stuff, right? So I think that was a blessing to see that, but that's how you do it. And then you just got to be consistent. I think so many coaches, especially strength coaches, right? Like we're not consistent who we are every day. Like just show up and be you every day. And you can't take your bad day out on your athletes. Like you can't come in and pissed off at the head coach or your wife or your dog or some person next to you, whatever. You come in angry and then you start taking it out on guys. That's only going to create issues. But if you are consistent in who you are every day and you come in that way, when things hit them, when bad things are happening and adversity strikes, people know who you are. They know your character. They know who you're going to be day in and day out. And so that they know that when they're having a bad day, they can look to you and lean on you and know that they have somewhere to go to help move them forward. And so from an individual standpoint, trying to help guys navigate those things, I think that's really important to understand about yourself is that you got to be consistent, stay humble, eat crumbs, and be consistent in your approach no matter what the situation. When you're on top, be the same person as when you're on the bottom. And so hard to do, easy to say, hard to do, but I think it's something that if you're cognizant of and you're working towards, we get better at the things that we work towards. And I had to really work to learn how to be consistent in who I was in my approach every day, no matter what the situation is. And am I perfect at it? Hell no. But, I'm going to work at it. And so I think that kind of hopefully answers your question from a big scale and then also kind of an individual personal scale as well, because it's multi-layered.
Yeah, and a lot of the questions I asked you are big questions. And I think you did a really good job of digesting them down into parts that people could take away from it.
I appreciate that. Dave Tate, I grew up on Elite FTS, and live, learn, pass on, man. Like, I love being able to talk about this stuff, and hopefully, somebody that's listening to this, can take something away from it. And if one person takes something away, I'm happy, because at the end of the day, what I love the most about this is being able to share experience and share and try to grow. I mean, the problem is I've got probably 10, 12 questions I'd love to ask you, but then we'd be here freaking, all night, because I just, I think it's so important that we have conversations and talk about these things, and I like talking about things that you don't typically hear on every podcast. I mean, we can all talk about sets and reps and freaking, I mean, we could go around and around and around about what the best set and rep scheme is, but like you said, none of that really matters if you're not a good person or a good coach or understand how to connect with people, or like you said, like you had that example with one of your athletes, like you had to understand the mental headspace to help him continue to grow. Like, how many coaches really approach it that way? And so hopefully, somebody in this that listens to this can take something from that, away, because I think those are the skills that a lot of young coaches need to learn. And I don't want to say worried about the profession. I think it's going to be fine. It's just I'm not seeing as many people that understand some of that stuff as much as you've seen in the past. That could just me getting older, and being just like every old salty dog, right? Like, they're not as tough as we used to be. But I think that's kind of an area that sometimes lacks in the curriculum is, hey, there's a lot that goes into the mental and emotional and sports sciencey side, that you don't even think about or even learn about going through college.
Well, man, when I reached out to you, there was no way I thought you'd answer. North Dakota State, all your guys' championships, everything you've done. A small podcast like this, sometimes it's hard, to get a strength coach from a college, especially one that's winning, to come on. And I can't thank you enough for coming on the show.
Man, I really appreciate you having me on. Like I said, I love talking. People usually have to put me on a timer. Otherwise, I'll just go all day. But man, like I said, just appreciate you having me on. And I'm definitely going to try to get you up here sometime and check us out. And then next time I come to Kansas City, probably around Christmas time, I'll be hitting you up. Come down and get a training session in and check out your spot. Yeah. Or maybe go grab a couple brews or something afterwards, or whatever you're into. But I appreciate you reaching out, and I had a lot of fun, man. I really appreciate the questions. You asked some fantastic questions that I love. I truly enjoyed being able to answer those questions for you.
Well, Coach, I really do appreciate it, and I hope you have a great evening. I'll take you up on that trip to North Dakota State. I'm already planning it.
Hey, perfect, man. We got plenty of space in our house. You can crash up with us, and I'll show you around. And I got a 4-bedroom, 3.5 bath townhome, so we could host people. So you don't have to worry about trying to find a expensive hotel room if you don't need to. So, but man, we'd love to have you up here and definitely show you around and continue talking. And I'll probably text you after this and got some questions for you. So, but man, blessed to be here and be on with you, and love your podcast. Got a chance to listen to quite a few episodes, man. So you definitely got a fan of me, and I've already sent a couple different episodes out to some of my buddies to listen to. So, I appreciate the work that you're doing, man.
Well, thank you very much. That means the world to me, and I hope you have a great evening.
I appreciate you too, man. Have a great one. Take care, and we'll talk to you soon.